All right, should be live now. So, good morning again, everyone, and welcome to our monthly query research progress update of our KNoWS group at Ghent University. The high-level goal of our team is the same as the last one. So, in order to hide away the complexities for reading and writing for application developers that want to interact with decentralized knowledge on the web, we look into building efficient read-write abstraction layers so that developers can more easily interact with these decentralized knowledge graphs. So these are the different people working in this area with their respective topics. You'll see here that we have a new team member, Jitse De Smet. There he is.
Hi.
Jitse has been around for a while, but now at the beginning of this month, he officially started his PhD with us, so that's great. Format is the same as usual, 3 slides per researcher, about 5 minutes of time for each researcher. So the first slide is about the high-level goal of the PhD, then the accomplishments of the previous month, and then the targets for the next month. And then after each set of slides, we have a short discussion and questions moment. So without further ado, we can begin with Jitse's slides.
Right. Hi. So my high-level goal is to optimize write performance in decentralized personal data ecosystems. So I aim to look at really the writing side of updating these personal data ecosystems, where currently we've done, the research group has mostly done research into reading from there, but I would also like to make effective and efficient writes possible. For this, my preliminary work has been my master's thesis, where I created the something called storage guidance vocabulary, which is basically a vocabulary that describes what kind of decisions need to be made when updating document-oriented interfaces. Like, for example, if you want to insert a social media post somewhere, but there's multiple documents that contain these kinds of posts, then it will guide you which document should contain your new created post, which is one use case there. And I also am looking at creating a Sparkle transpiler, since the Sparkle 1.2 working group is coming to an end, so there should be a new specification there. And we would like to have a way that our abstract layer, in this case, for example, Communica, is able to translate queries in one version of Sparkle to an interface that uses another version of Sparkle, endpoint, and then that should work. And I think that's my high-level goal. What I worked on is first finishing the specification of the expression evaluator. So as my student job last year, I was working on a specific actor in the Communica monorepo, which was the expression evaluator. And there, it has different functions that it can evaluate, for example. But it didn't have the modularity that the rest of Communica had, and I basically rewrote the expression evaluator to also have that modularity there. Second, I investigated the CRDTs some more, because there's now a starting CRDT for RDF working group, and I wanted to read a bit up on these CRDTs because I think they will be valuable when updating for these writing abstractions, that we can also write locally first and then synchronize to an RDF store or to some interface write through CRDTs. So I looked a bit into that. Then I did some preliminary work into that Sparkle transpiler, first looking at parsing Sparkle, and I'm still working on that. And then I did some general onboarding, which is just reading documentation of stuff. So, right, next targets. So that's implementing the preliminary transpiler. And for the first, my first use case that I would like to try is transpiling Sparkle 1.1 to, with an adjust function to Sparkle 1.1 without the adjust function. Basically what that means is Communica now has support, at this time, has support for extended date time support, but it lacks I'm lacking the word in English. Yeah, it also, the spec where it comes from, the part of the spec also describes an adjust function. And the Communica doesn't implement that because the parser doesn't allow us at this time. And I would like to change that, but then also be able to transpile within those tools. And since that's a limited project, well, limited amount of work, I think that's nice to start for the transpiler. Then I will also research and write about the formalization of the storage guidance vocabulary. So that's that vocabulary from my master's thesis. I'll be looking at some more fundamental formalization, because that was one of the feedback that I got from my master's thesis defense, that it could use some more formalization. And then last, research update interfaces and already existing ones and ones being created. So that's basically in order to start researching the right abstractions. I think it's essential to understand right interfaces. So I would like to look at what right interfaces exist and the properties of them, like also outside of this field, and then also within our research group itself, there's some people looking into different interfaces, and I would like to look with them at like what kind of right properties that would have. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jitse. Any questions for Jitse? Yes, Ruben.
So these are indeed very interesting topics to look at, like if we're starting out with right. So I think it's good now to be very bottom up in all the explorations. So I see different topics like the Sparkle translations and the CRDTs. So it's good to do some of the explorations. At the same time, we should also then start looking at like how does it connect at the higher level, where are things going once we have this low level understanding. So what I mean is that, for instance, I see an opportunity that Sparkle is a language that just captures semantically what kind of selection you're doing, what kind of change you're making. I wonder if it makes sense to kind of make the link to CRDTs there as well. Basically, can we have semantic CRDTs like that? We kind of say, okay, look, this is not just like a letter that I'm changing there, but this is what it means. This is like how a Sparkle query translates to multiple CRDTs, for instance. And can we use that? So that's already a bit higher, connecting those. And even higher is then looking at, for our group, to use cases. Okay, but what are we going to use the CRDTs for instance, in the context of like wallets and working offline first? And so to summarize, as you know, it's more of a comment than a question, but like good that you're exploring the low level topics. Let's after some exploration keep in mind how we connect them first, CRDTs and Sparkle, and then after that, what are we going to do with them together? If that makes sense yet. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And with that regard to CRDTs, I think there's I was in the first meeting around CRDTs, and I see that the community has some broader questions at where to position themselves. So like where, like how semantic, do we want to keep the semantics that we already have, or do we want to add some more features on top of RDF? Like, for example, do we want to also be able to update the objects of triples? So not only just updating triples themselves, but like updating within a triple. So I think that there will be a lot of discussion like where to position these CRDTs, because like the first meeting was already based on that. Like, yeah.
So you're referring to updating literals, like if you have a big literal, maybe only modifying a part of that literal.
So that was already like a fundamental question. I think that ties together with what Ruben asks or mentions, like we should really, with these CRDTs, look at where we want them to go.
And of course, and also keep Peter Kolpaert in the loop of some conversations, because he has the event-driven way of looking at stuff. It would be nice if we have some unifying theory that connects all of these together.
Yeah.
All right. Unless there are any other questions, let us move forward. And I think the next person is Jonni.
So my current high-level goal is to investigate adaptive client-side techniques with the aim of achieving some level of server-independent query optimization without. So basically, I wish to not rely on the servers, because different servers provide different types of data to assist in query optimization. So that can be made use of, but then it would be nice to have something independent. But that's a bit further off, because because what I worked on was basically just HTTP retry improvements and also an HTTP rate limiter, because Communica currently has the issue that it sends as many requests as it can without considering that the servers might not be able to respond to all of those requests. So I have a working rate limiter, a preliminary one, and it helps with some queries, but it still needs some additional work. Yep. And then I have also started rewriting a paper about the join restarts finally to target another conference, because it's more of an engineering type of approach, a demonstration of performance improvements that can be gained by implementing some techniques. So it doesn't, strictly speaking, introduce anything new. It's more of a demonstration of how applying adaptive client-side techniques can actually help, even with the link traversal. Like despite the inherent overhead of link traversal, there's still some improvements that can be gained by client-side optimizations. And then I also spent some time looking into solid bench result validation. Basically, the idea of solid bench is to provide a distributed version of the LDPC social network benchmark over solid pods. So to be able to validate the results from that benchmark, I loaded all of that data into Apache Jena with Fuseki, and then ran all the queries against that one to see what type of results should be expected in a centralized scenario. And this was actually inspired by something Brian, who will be presenting later, was doing for similar purposes. So yeah, my slide just happens to be first. But the idea is to see if the results from link traversal are actually correct, especially when applying different techniques, but more on those on his presentation. So my next steps are to finish rewriting the join restart paper. That's the first thing that I want to do. And then I have to finish the rate limiter, because there was also another meeting where someone was asking about rate limiting, because they also noticed that Communica is sending a lot of requests. So I didn't think it was that urgent, but it seems that other people also could find it useful. And then I also wish to continue work on void description parsing, because when different data sources provide a void description, then it's possible to better include them in the query plan during link traversal if you know which triple patterns those data sources will answer. So if you know that none of them will actually answer any of your patterns, then you can just ignore the data source. And if it answers some of the patterns, then you could try to include that source for those patterns specifically and things like that. So that's what I hope to look into. And that's my presentation.
All right, thanks, Jonni. Any questions for Jonni? Yes, Ruben.
This is my obligatory, this is more of a comment than a question kind of thing. So actually first, a comment for you, Ruben T. I noticed now in Jonni's presentation that we might want to change something to the very successful presentation structure that we've been doing, which is, I wonder, Ruben, if you should start with a slide like, where am I going? Like, what am I trying to achieve first? So like, what is the big picture here? And then in order to achieve this big picture, this is what I've done the past couple of weeks. This is what I'm doing the next couple of weeks. But then to you, Jonni, so especially in a more senior stage at PhD, I do want to see the connections. I know that it hasn't always been easy to find the right targets for publications for the work, but nonetheless, I want to see a bit more, say, like strength in the way that you talk about. Look, like actually, this is my vision. This is how I want to change query. This is where she would be going. And to achieve this, this is what I've done. Whether it's, and maybe you can say, okay, this one worked, this one didn't work right so well, and this is what I still need to do. So I need to see this purpose, this direction, like ultimately, if successful, what does this mean for query? So I will ask you now on the spot, Jonni, but if you don't find the answer, it's okay. But like, so what would this purpose be? But like, what are you really like achieving here? Like what, if these things are successful, those targets, how does it change query?
Well, yeah, it's on the first slide. So I wish to find some way to optimize queries without relying on server-side things, because servers don't consistently provide void descriptions. They don't consistently provide a lot of things in general, and you can have different types of interfaces with different servers. So that's why I think it makes sense to focus on client-side techniques, and especially client-side techniques that do not rely on the servers themselves. So to that end, so far I have tried to look into adaptive techniques, and those can provide measurable improvement. But the improvement they provide is basically some percentage of query execution time reduction compared to the baseline of not applying those techniques. But even that, compared to a centralized approach, like with the result validation when loading all the data centrally and just executing the query, like link traversal is still extremely slow. So once I finish what I'm currently doing, I want to look into ways to because if you have a set of data and you want to extract something from that data, then you can, to speed it up, you can either speed up the extraction process, or you can reduce the amount of data to consider. So once I finish what I'm currently doing, which is more on the side of optimizing the extraction process, I want to look into reducing the amount of data that you have to consider.
No, sounds good, Jonni. So I see maybe I was misunderstanding the purpose of this first slide indeed. And just very quickly, like I would argue, like, well, this is not really a goal. Like this is like the means to achieve the goal. Like I'm going to investigate. So I think we need to get this a bit sharper, but we can do that. But the explanation you just gave, Jonni, like where you said, like, look, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is how it connects. That was the story I was missing. Like this kind of connection, exactly what I meant. So this is good. Can you shoot me an invite for a meeting sometime next week, half an hour or 15 minutes together with Ruben T, where we go into that story? Because I like it. That's a good one.
Oh, okay. I will try to remember to send it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Fabien also has a question or comment.
Yeah, it was, well, it's somewhere in between. So with an outside view, and if I was, I don't know how you wrote your paper or how you presented it, but in addition to what Ruben V just said, what would really help me is upfront an example of application scenario in which the approach you are having and the fact it's going to improve link traversal is convincing. For instance, at one moment in your presentation, you mentioned social network data. So if that's the one, you may want to use it as a blue thread across the presentation. The reason why I'm mentioning that is whenever I have to defend solid approach and link traversal approach to some people in the community who may be skeptical, at one point, the discussion is always in which application cases do we really end up in that situation, and therefore this approach or this optimization is going to have an impact. So if you have this kind of illustrating scenario, motivating scenario, that also avoid having a reviewer thinking of his own scenario in which it won't work, or of all the scenario in which it won't work, that could be a good way to, how can I say, deactivate some criticism.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you. Because I actually had one reviewer. I forgot which paper it was, but it was also about solid. And the reviewer started their review by noting that solid hasn't really been gaining any traction in actual use cases. So I wasn't sure how to reply to it in a way that made sense. So I just ignored it. But
I think exactly that's exactly. I mean, I think we all encounter this kind of review or this kind of discussion with a strongly opinioned colleague. But if you start by a scenario in which you say, okay, in this application, I have a naturally distributed, fragmented personal data that are very small and very distributed, and I have no other choice and therefore that's the scenario in which I'm going to evaluate new strategies. Then no one can criticize you for being in that situation. That would be my advice. Try to have a unifying discourse like that together with what Ruben V just said before.
Thank you. I will try to keep it in mind for future.
Okay, I think we can then move to the next person, and I thought that was Brian. It's over to you.
Hi everyone. So my general high-level goal is to optimize link traversal queries using explicit data publication structure. So more generally, what I'm trying to do is based on the constatation that the web doesn't really have a big structure. However, a data publisher, often when they publish their data, they have either implicit or explicit structure about the data publication, so that when we are doing traversal queries, we could exploit the structure to do some optimization. For instance, what I'm working on right now is to do better source selection. We could also maybe have some query planning, or we could also better query planning, and we could also maybe do some schema alignment based on those explicit structure that data publisher provide that we cannot really get if we look at the web as a holistic structure. We can go to the next slide. So what I've worked on is like Jonni, I've investigated result validation of solid bench, but my approach was to use a convert all the data from solid bench into a single HTTP file and to use Comnica to query over it to get some sort of ground truth of what the results should be, because when you do link traversal, we have reachability criteria, and now we have some pruning heuristic, so we cannot really be sure that we are getting the right result. And another objective that I wanted to do with it was to see if some queries that we execute are actually realistic, particularly in the context of link traversal, because for instance, some complex queries are really, really complex. And maybe even in a centralized context, they might not be able to be finished in the expected time. But I haven't, I've started to do it, but put it into future work because I'm working right now on the paper, which is the second point for ESWC, which is about the shape index specification and method that I'm building for link traversal query processing. So what I've worked on it mainly was to define the algorithm, to write them down inside of the paper. So to define formally what is a shape index, to define some sort of composite reachability criteria so that we can stack multiple reachability criteria together, and consider also pruning, because reachability criteria are more about discovering sources and less about excluding them. And also we define two containment problems, so one for discovery of data sources and another one for some sort of exclusivity, something that is a bit similar to exclusive groups. And the third thing that I've worked on was to express the tree specification relation in terms of Sparkle algebra, because they are really similar to Sparkle algebra. And most people that are going to use tree are going to do some Sparkle queries. So it will be easier for an implementation and for the understanding of the specification if it were already defined in Sparkle algebra. So I spent a bit of time on it. The third point was to finish a query source wrapper to do some very, very simple reasoning, to do some schema alignment. So it's mainly based on same as relation. So what it do basically is that when we acquire a source, we wrap it into some sort of identifier that is a query source, that is a query source. And with this query source, what I'm doing is that I'm producing the implicit fact based on some rules. And right now they are just same as rule. So that when we do a query, we do the union between the data sources that we have gotten and the data sources of implicit fact that has been generated. The last point is that I've done some scientific communication. So I went to the AMW workshop and I presented my short paper, again on the shape index. And I've also went to the triple meeting, which is a collaboration between multiple universities for federated queries in the context of bioinformatics. And go to the next slide. So this month, I'm planning to finish the ESWC paper on the shape index. So I'm planning to finish the experiment and incorporate them into the paper. I also want to finish writing the algorithm that I've written, mainly the one on containment algorithm, the containment algorithms, because the other one are, at least I have a first draft. And I also need to have some internal reviews about the paper. I'm also going to present a poster at ISWC on link traversal query processing with tree documents. So we were using some rule-based method to prune irrelevant sources. So it has some similarities with the shape index, but it's still different, but it's the same sort of general line of work. And I'm also planning to finish the schema alignment work. So I've done the query source wrapper is finished, but I need to incorporate it inside of the query processing, and I also need to create some test cases and a small demo to demonstrate what we've done, and maybe have a bit of measurement of performance and comparison with simply rewriting the query itself. And that's it for me.
And I believe for the last one, the idea was also to, in the future, extend it to more complicated entailment regimes.
Yes, right. Yes, but for this month, I'm just planning to finish it and maybe, have some small demo. But yeah, we are planning to extend it maybe in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for Bryan? Yes, Ruben.
Just a quick shout out for everyone. Do have a look at Brian's ESWC paper draft. The research questions are really, really sharp and on point. So have a look at how he investigates the topics he just talked about. It's very insightful.
Thank you.
Yes, Fabien. You're still muted.
Okay, usual joke. So thanks for the presentation. I'd like to come back on the same as. So you said you were working on a very, very, very simple reasoning. That's what you wrote. So when you consider the same as right now, do you consider it at the resource level, at the schema level? Do you consider same as between classes, between properties, or between resources? That would be my first question, or that would be the question I would ask if I was seeing you presenting that in a conference. And the second question is, there have been papers in the past, such as same as is not the same as, and all the papers after that, that have been discussing the problem of scoping or not these equivalents. And how do you see things? How in your opinion, are you just going to apply the pure semantics of the same as defined in R, or do you already foresee some problems?
Okay, so for the first question, right now what I'm doing is that basically the user, or we can also discover a document, just provides some rules. So you just say that this term is the same as this other term. So what I'm doing is that when I'm having a data source, I just iterate over it, and then I create an implicit fact based on the same as relation. So I'm doing something really simple. I haven't given more thought about it, to be honest.
Brian, just to be sure I understand, what you expect from user is the same as at the individual level. So Brian is the same as Bri, for instance, or is also at the schema level, because you're talking about schema alignment. So person is the same as a human, the class. The property level, first name is the same as F name. Which are the cases you are addressing? All of the above, one of the above?
I think all of the above, because basically what I'm doing is really on the term level. So you're saying that this RAI is the same as this other RAI. This is what I'm implementing.
Okay. And the strategy would be, in your opinion, the strategy would be the same whether you are at the individual level or at the schema level?
I'm not sure to answer that question. I think so, but I haven't thought about it.
Okay. Okay, and so in your case, because the user actually stated that equivalence, you don't question the scope of the equivalence, which would make sense, right?
Because what I'm doing is that if the user provided, then I'm executing those rules for every triple that I'm getting. Okay. But if I'm discovering some rules inside of, let's say, a pod, then I apply some sort of scope. So saying that I'm applying this rule on the scope of this pod.
Okay, so you scope to the to the pod. Okay, interesting.
But if the person making the query provide the rule, then I said it's a general rule for everything.
Okay, good. So that would be an interesting approach. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Okay, good. In the interest of time, let us maybe move to the next person, and that is Elias.
Yeah. So very similar to last month, but I'll start really high level. And my project is essentially approaching the problem of genomic data and using it in clinical practice. The general strategy that my project is sort of focused toward is using decentralized data stores and semantic representations of this genomic data for more usability in clinical practice. And it's exploring the basic foundations and functionalities necessary to then extrapolate out to actual use in implementations. In my work right now, I'm working on one of the first parts of that is the conversion of genomic data, which is right now in VCF or sort of standardized tabular format as RDF. This is there have been other people and research groups in the past that have looked into this. So I'm trying to adopt an approach that is optimized for decentralized environments and look at how we can do it in the context of a use case for me that is pharmacogenomics, or the use of genomic data to prescribe medications. That sort of big overall goal informs the couple smaller, or rather more granular things that I've been working, or that I'm working toward right now. So the first is a review paper on why genome data sharing is necessary for clinical practice and just scoping the use of genomic data. Yeah, I've been working on that, as we'll see in the next slide. And then because I am hosting these genomic data in a decentralized environment, we chose to use Solid as the actual implementation for the storage. And on that front, I'm working on a user web application for interacting with those Solid storages in a more intuitive way, because right now the UIs available for Solid, in my opinion, are not very usable by someone who has no sort of computer science semantic web experience. So I've developed the Solid Cockpit application for that sort of usage of genomic data in a decentralized environment. And then, like I described, looking at representing genomic data as RDF in that process. Next slide. So what I worked on over the past month, I have, formalized I'm about halfway to 3/4 done with Solid Cockpit, which is just a web application that allows for the interaction with data in a solid pod, uploading files to a solid pod, and eventually being able to query data in a solid pod and Sparkle endpoints in a federated manner, all within this web application. It's coming along. I'm targeting, which we'll see in my next targets, to give this as a demo paper in the future. But yeah, that is one of the biggest things that I've been working on over the past month. Also, I am looking to publish this review paper in Genetics in Medicine. It's a big A1 journal in the bioinformatics medical realm. And so I'm finalizing that, and I'm aiming to submit it by the end of the month, of November. And then I've been working on setting up actual solid pod instance on a server that is web accessible for future development and experimentation with this VCF conversion process. And that is set up now. So moving forward into next month, I will have everything that I need to do the development and experimentation. So my next targets, lots of paper writing and lots of just general communication of all of this work that I have done and plan to do. It's all written there, so I'm not going to go over every point. But another thing that's on the horizon is we're looking at doing a real-world federated query benchmark among many solid endpoints that are real-world solid endpoints, like those maintained by the Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics and Wikidata, DBpedia, those kind of large Sparkle endpoints, and real-world federated queries to test existing federation algorithms like FedEx or Splendid, and maybe a couple others among these real-world endpoints, because most of the benchmarks have been done in a more controlled environment, and we would like to assess them on a more real kind of scale. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Elias. Any questions?
I have a small question, but from a technical, just if you want to test these real world these real-world interfaces, can you just do that, or like will they be mad that you start abusing their server?
I mean, they're kind of designed to be used. It's more so just trying to see what the federation algorithms provide compared to each other. I don't think it'll be overly computationally demanding for the actual endpoints.
Okay.
But then again, that remains to be seen.
All right.
But a side note to that, some of those queries will be on top of some bioinformatics related data sets, and those endpoints are managed by people in the projects that we're doing this in context of. So yeah, they know about it.
Okay.
At least. I see Fabien also has a question or comment.
Yes. So if I understand well, the solid cockpit has an HCI dimension to it, right? Am I right? There is a display and interaction. So
yeah, what was the acronym you used? I didn't catch that.
Human computer interface dimension. Okay. So my question would immediately be, when you are going to evaluate that, do you have a special task in mind and a protocol for evaluating the efficiency of the interface itself? Because as soon as you, so especially in our community, when you write a paper and you have a sentence saying, I provide a new user-friendly interface, then I know some people in the community who are going to jump on it and say, oh, how do you prove it's user-friendly? What is your protocol for evaluating the interaction? How was the interaction designed, perform, and so on? So I was wondering if you had that dimension and if you had in mind a task and an evaluation protocol for the user interaction itself.
There are a set of tasks that we designed the actual user interface to accomplish, including just basic tasks like uploading a file to your solid pod, connecting to your solid pod even before that, querying the solid pod, changing privacy for particular containers or resources within the solid pod, and then just moving things around or deleting files, for instance. As of right now, we have not devised a non-subjective way of measuring how user-friendly the interface is, but I plan on exploring. I remember from ISWS, we had a good lecture on how that kind of assessment is done. And so I was going to look into those materials in the coming weeks to devise a way where, yes, we can make it much more, objective.
So I'm going to post a link here. This is a link. I don't even, to be honest, it's an old paper that I haven't participated enough to the last evaluation session of it. But I know at least the two first authors, Patrice and Alain, they both are from the HCI community. That's the reason why I want to share it with you, because it's also to show you that this, so I'm putting the link here, they can present or write things a bit differently. So I chose this one because it has some topic in your intersection to personal data control. But this one is in the mobile realm, so it's not the same realm. This is by no means, I wouldn't follow exactly what is done in that paper. It's just to give you an idea how it's written in these other communities. And also, I don't know how much you want to do that, but also considering going to this community such as Kai or Kai Workshop, if you have that, because that would be a good way to talk about all these topics, including Solid, to that community.
Sure, I will consider it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can go forward. Then over to Maarten.
Okay, my high-level goal is to optimize decentralized querying using aggregators via incremental processing. So aggregators are a ecosystem part that's like a sort of a cache that performs some sort of operation or transformation on the data and makes it available again to the public, or not the public, but a certain part of the public. And my plan is to check this out with querying or Sparkle queries, and then updating when the data changes, updating the data via incremental processing. So that's the high-level goal. What I've been working on the past month has been on the latter part of that sentence, and do the incremental processing in particular. I've been working for a while now on an incremental view maintenance technique paper, and that's, I said, ready for internal review, but almost ready for internal review. I'm very close now, just a few days, I think, and then it's finished. And the paper in general, I want to explain everything here, but I don't think I have the time for it. So just in short, it's comparing rate-based techniques, single-order delta queries, and higher-order delta queries. All these techniques into one engine. It's called Incremunica. That's the part below it. And I compared all these techniques, and I found that single-order delta queries is the simplest to implement, but of course also the least performant. And then in general, I would say that the most basic form of the rate, I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but the most basic form there is probably not the only join algorithm that you would need, but it's fairly simple and it performs in most cases the fastest. So yeah, that's in very short what that paper is about. And then in Incremunica, Incremunica is a incremental version of Communica. I've been updating it to the version 4 from version 2, which took a while, and that's also almost done. And yeah, the next targets are start work on a query aggregator paper. So here it's just the idea of explaining our vision on the aggregator with a use case, and how our vision and how it should be used, and etc. And yeah, the idea now in the coming months is to figure out the scope and then start working on it. At the same time, also work on the proof of concept of this query aggregator. I've been working on this for a while now, but yeah, it still needs some work, mainly the policies. Another part of our team is working on policies with the UMA flow, and yeah, implementing this idea into the aggregator then. And yeah, then finally is rewrote the Incremunica resource paper I submitted to ISWC last year, and I plan on submitting it to ESWC. The main comment there was the lack of performance evaluation. So yeah, that shouldn't be that much work. It's just including the performance evaluation. And then finally, at the same time, also further working on Incremunica, because mainly with the expression evaluator of Jitse, I can now easily implement all the aggregate functions inside Incremunica. So the min, max, count, etc., and doing those incrementally, which is would be really cool to have incrementally. So yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maarten. Ruben has a question. And then
Maarten, what is the link with Jitse's work and CRDTs? Have you guys talked? What kind of connections can we make?
No, it's the expression evaluator that he did in his student work of Communica.
Yeah, it's more like look at a bigger picture. Incremunica, right? Updates. So how to connect?
I'm actually not sure to what extent it would be useful, but
I mean, you guys should talk. I mean, so just intuitively at a high level to me, it seems like, well, you know, you're doing updates. He's going to do writes. There's going to be CRDTs. Would be. I think there must be a connection. I would definitely have a chat about it.
Indeed, I've Noël de Martin. I don't know. You probably know him. Has also worked on CRDTs in Solid, and he has a very, I would say, basic implementation of it. And I was planning on actually having implementing his interface into Incremental so you can use it. The main part is discovering the changes in the data. Indeed, CRDTs do this if they would do it efficiently, where you can have the changes faster than normal. I don't know. That depends on the interface that Jitse would use. But indeed, there is a big connection between Jitse's work and me, where I can use the CRDTs Jitse produces.
Yeah, but I don't think I'll produce CRDTs myself, because there's how the working last week. The WP, I don't know what it is. WPC working group, community group. Community group. So I think mainly it will come out of there. So I think might be interesting to go to also subscribe on that working group. But I think last week I had a nice discussion with Peter Kolpaert that also involved your work, but it might also be interesting to go over that, because Peter Kolpaert had this view of like pipelining these flows, and I think there he saw that your that Incremental is really interesting to like create a pipeline basically. But then the idea there would be that for me, writing in like in an interface that's basically a pipeline of like Incremental, you could say actors, like engines, would be really easy because I would just write to the original source. But it might be interesting to go over that, and also like we can draw the same diagram that Peter drew, because it was interesting. He has talked to me about it as well, to implement Incremental there. Yeah.
Yeah, and also guys, so that by itself sounds good, but so there's a low level, but also just on a high level. So forget CRDTs, forget. I mean, like we've got Jitse who's working on updates. We've got here incremental querying of stuff. We got Peter C, who's working on like changes, right? I think the three of you should sit together and be able to tell me on a high level how it all connects, what the story is, and there can be, I mean, it's not an obligation to be connected or integrated. One thing could be actually we're perfectly decoupled. They're different stories that just talk to each other. These points, okay, great. Or it could be, you know what, here's one big vision how it all fits together. But we should know on a conceptual level, and then also technology-wise, what do we need to align? But I mean, it's not urgent, but be able to tell me that story of how it all fits together.
From the meeting with Peter, well, the meeting during lunch with Peter, basically Peter talks a lot about pushing or pulling of data flows, and I think on like a high level goal, I am someone that would push changes, while you kind of like pull. You're something that watches, like Incremental watches over some data and then updates itself, while I would be the other approach, where I'm like, oh, this is a passive thing, and I will update it, so I will push changes. But that's really a technical nuance for Peter Kolpaert's flows, whilst I think both our approaches are valid in certain scenarios, and then within the work of that within the view of Peter, it doesn't really matter that much, whether it's push or pull. But there was a nice diagram, and it was really conceptually easy to follow in that case.
Super good.
All right. In the interest of time, let's move forward. We can go to Ruben.
All right. So my high-level goal hasn't changed. We still think that because it's a client-side engine, there will be patterns by the clients in what queries they issue, and that we can use these patterns to optimize queries and make them faster. So high level, this is about, first of all, we want to use caching to use these patterns. And also we want to measure how much we improve. So those are the two leading threads currently in my work, which is reflected in the next slide. When we have cached data, we think we can use join sampling over this cached data to inform ourselves over what joins are best, so we can optimize these link traversal queries better. And also for the metric, I need some systems that I'm currently implementing. So the first bullet point is basically for these transformations of intermediate results. We need these transformations to implement link prioritization algorithms that depend on the information about intermediate results. So that's what I'm doing, getting that into Communica. And then the second bullet point is the sort of interesting one. I've implemented a proof of concept of join sampling and using dynamic programming on these sampled cardinalities. The dynamic programming is to use often use DPCCP. So here we have some results. Note this is very proof of concept. It's very slow. So I'm only showing on the right side the query runtime and not the actual time it takes to make the plan, because that is really high because of sort of implementation overhead. And on the left side, we have the number of produced results. We'll start with this. We see usually it's on the sort of queries with a lot of results. Join sampling is quite a lot better because these are logarithms of the number of results produced. But when there's very little results, for example, in C1 or F1, we see that we have somewhat more results than the sort of standard Communica. This is not too bad because it's a difference between 8 intermediate results and 4, for example, or 0 and 4. But the large differences are actually quite large. For example, 1 in C3. It doesn't seem like much, but it's a difference between 5,000 intermediate results and 2,500 in sampling. So that performs quite a bit better on some queries it is. On the right side, we have the query runtime. So only actually executing the query. We see that we are usually a bit worse with sampling for the easier queries. But again, the difficult queries like C3, F5, and S1, our sampling approach is a lot faster, several orders of magnitude actually. But then again, because the total runtime is quite high, which I don't show, we still need to sort of optimize this approach and do some more fine tuning because it's a very proof of concept result right here. So in the next slide.
Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, so my next targets are, so given that I've almost finished the systems that I need for link prioritization algorithms, I'm gonna implement them and test the metric that we're defining, which I presented last month. And then also setting up these experiments to test the metric and the algorithms and get some nice, huge benchmark results so we know what our metric does. Then, yeah, I need to profile this joint sampling approach because I want to know where the major bottlenecks are that make it so slow and what I need to change in the setup or other implementation details. Then, even if I fix these bottlenecks, there will be some problems with enumerating very large queries. So the paper I implemented already has a budget defined, so I need to implement this and also incorporate this into the dynamic programming approach. Like you don't want to enumerate join order options that don't have cardinality estimates, because that's kind of pointless. So you just need to make decision only about the data or the information that you have. And finally, Communica has a bind join algorithm. This is currently not taken into account in the enumeration because we only use binary joins and keep doing that until we have the entire plan. So you might want to incorporate also a cost or an estimation function for the bind join and include this in the dynamic programming so we can sort of make even better choices. So that will probably be next month, hopefully. So yeah, if there's any questions, let me know.
Yes, Ruben.
Ruben, there's something wrong with the graphs. I don't know what exactly it is, but we need to have a look at this. Maybe also shoot me an invite for next week. But specifically, so you're using a logarithm, which is fine, but then you cannot use a bar chart because the human eye has a tendency to look for differences, but like a bar is meaningful in a logarithm. Like they can be meaningful if you use like a gradient color on them ish kind of, but so fundamentally the fact that logarithmic results and bars are being used together shows me that there's something wrong, because the difference aren't meaningful. So maybe I'm not saying you cannot use logarithms. It's more like maybe if you need to use logarithms, it should be a logarithm of the ratios of like the number of intermediate results. But like as currently presented, there's something off. I need to think about it. But look at your results. Like try a couple of variations on it, because it might be hiding some deeper conceptual problems as well. So have a look at your data. Try to present it in a couple of ways. But there's something off. But I need to think about what exactly it is.
Yeah.
Just to react on that, I completely agree. And I think also something in the slide. Usually, when you use a log scale, the scale on the left and the grid of the chart actually gives the log space visually. And there, because you chose a very simple scale on the left and a completely blank background, all the clues of the log space are lost. Yeah. Which do not help the point Ruben had.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very quickly put together graph. I also see I missed the log in the time in seconds too. So yeah, I would have to make it a lot better for the actual paper. I just wanted to sort of give an indication, but it's not very clear. That's true.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about the presentation either, but like it might be hiding underlying problems as well. So we should be very cautious. So do take some time trying to just show the results in different ways to see if we maybe are missing insights and so on. Not like this. Have a close look.
Yeah, will do. Thanks.
Brian, you also had a question?
Yes, I was wondering if this method only apply when you execute the same query multiple times, or if you execute some similar query, for instance, a query that is contained within something else or that is different, but can rewrite it to the same if it's something that you will consider or that is something that is already considered.
What exactly do you mean in terms of caching and then similar queries, or just the joint sampling itself?
I was thinking about the general approach of because you want to have personalized engine, and right now I'm guessing that it's if you execute the same query multiple times. I'm guessing right now with the joint sampling. I was wondering if you are going also to look into if you have queries that are similar or contained within each other, but that are not exactly the same. If it's something you will investigate, or if it wouldn't work with what you are actually working right now.
Yeah, so I do plan to evaluate like how sensitive the caching is to what repetitions in data queried exist. So I will definitely investigate that. I'll not only do the same query multiple times and see how much better the second query execution will be, but how exactly I'm going to measure this is not clear yet. I might, for example, randomly decide to not cache data to sort of reflect a sort of absence of data and see how the performance evolves. But yeah, I'll need to look into how exactly I'm going to model this similarity or closeness of queries.
But just to be sure, right now the sampling is that you execute multiple different queries, and then you sample over all of this join, or is a sample of this specific query that you executed?
Yeah, so sampling currently is implemented in Communica as a proof of concept, base Communica, where it just samples from a file, and it samples all sort of intermediate results sizes. So it is not yet in linked traversal.
Okay. Thank you.
Please.
All right, maybe one last thing. So if I am correct, these experiments are on what if. I would recommend to also maybe try out your approach on the Berlin Sparkle benchmark, because I noticed that some of the different join algorithms can perform quite differently across these two benchmarks, because in what if, the what if queries tend to be less selective than the Berlin Sparkle benchmark queries, so you might see some different results there.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
Right. Then we can go over to me. I'll keep it short because we're running a bit late. So yeah, besides helping out the different people who talked before, my main goal is to so in order to achieve this efficient read-write abstraction, I am investigating different algorithms and data structures to achieve this goal. So what I worked on in the previous month was releasing the new major version of Communica. So yeah, a bunch of refactorings have happened, which have a very good impact on overall performance. Besides that, I also did some work related to the RDF star W3C working group. I added a bunch of specification tests there, so mainly a positive and negative syntax test for checking if some of the new features of the spec are supported or are not supported by parsers. Then I also implemented initial support for this in the Sparkle.js parser, which is the one that Communica uses internally. Then I also received news that finally this paper that I worked on a while ago was published at the ACM SIGWeb newsletter. So it's an article about some of the open challenges when we want to query within a decentralized environment. And also a bit of motivation for that, things like that. So that's what I worked on in the previous month. My next targets are continuing a bit more in the RDF style working group. So besides the positive and negative syntax tests, I also want to add actual evaluation tests. So that will require some implementation into Communica, but I suspect that effort there will be limited because actually most of the additions in the working group are mostly on the syntax, and most of the evaluation is quite similar to what RDF star in the past already did. So I don't foresee too much work there. And besides that, I want to continue with the videos I recorded a while ago for the new lecture on web scripting in the web development course. And that's all for me. Any final questions or comments, either for me or anyone else?
Just one quick question, Ruben. You didn't mention the new working group, which is going to be mostly based on Solid. Do you intend to participate? How do you see things? Are you happy? Are you unhappy?
I'm not really following it in detail myself, but I think Ruben just raised his hand to answer on that question.
Oh yeah, shall I send you an email? Like we should maybe talk one-on-one about this, because there's I mean, I could say yes, we're going to participate, and we are, but the landscape is interesting. So I'll send you a proposal for us to chat a bit at length about these kind of things.
Sure,
yes.
sure. Please send the invite. And you probably know that Pierre-Antoine Champagne is
absolutely
inside my group, so do not hesitate to use either channel. Okay.
Yeah, super.
Okay, that's all for today then. So the next progress updating, so usually we do this every month, but we will skip the next 2 times. So the next progress updating will be January 28th, again at 9:30. So I hope to see you all there then again. Okay, unless there are any final comments or questions, I think we're done for today.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thanks.
Good work. Thank you, everyone.
See you all.
Bye.